Hey everyone, welcome back. It's wild how some books they really stand the test of time. And speaking of timeless, we're diving into Walden by Thoreau today.
Oh, classic choice.
Right. It's, for those of you out there, maybe you're already into it or curious about this whole simple living thing, self-sufficiency.
Living deliberately.
Yes, living deliberately, exactly. That was Thoreau's whole deal. This guy, back in the 1840s, he was already feeling like the world was moving too fast. Sound familiar?
I think we can all relate to that a little bit, maybe more now than ever.
Totally. So what does he do? Builds himself a cabin at Walden Pond, ditches the distractions, and tries to really get back to basics, live in tune with nature. It was like his own little experiment in self-sufficiency.
His own personal reset button.
Exactly. And one of the things that really struck me is how differently Thoreau defined progress.
Oh, absolutely. It went completely against the grain of what everyone else considered progress back then.
Right. Back then, it was all about bigger houses, fancier clothes, just more, more, more. But Thoreau, he saw that as a hamster wheel, just running in place.
And he wasn't afraid to just step off of it completely. He believed that real progress, true progress, meant aligning yourself with nature's rhythms.
Finding contentment in simplicity. It's like he's saying, hey, what if we have it all backwards? Like, check out this line, he says. If men would steadily observe realities only and not allow themselves to be deluded, life, to compare it with such things as we know, would be like a fairy tale and the Arabian Nights entertainments.
Wow.
Right. He's talking about finding the magic in the everyday, not chasing the next big thing.
And this was before the 24/7 news cycle, before we were all glued to our screens, constantly bombarded with information.
Can you imagine what he would think now?
I can only imagine. But even back then, he recognized that most news was just gossip, just distractions, keeping people from actually living. He was advocating for a serious digital detox before digital detox was even a thing.
He would tell us to put down the phones, go outside, listen to the birds.
Absolutely. He was all about direct experience, especially in nature.
Not just reading about it in a book.
Exactly. You had to live it, feel it, understand it on a visceral level. I'm reminded of that story where he's trying to help his visitor, Therian, understand Homer.
The Greek poet?
Yes,
Yeah.
and instead of launching into some big academic analysis, he connects Homer's epics to their own experiences with woodchucks.
He's like, forget the textbooks, let's talk woodchucks.
Exactly. He found a way to make this ancient literature relevant to their lives by grounding it in their shared natural world.
That's actually kind of brilliant. But it also makes me think about how much Thoreau valued simplifying experiences. And that ties into his views on possessions, on what we consider luxury, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thoreau believed that we often mistake complexity for luxury, especially when it comes to our homes and our clothes.
We think a bigger house equals a better life.
Right, but for Thoreau, all that stuff just added complications, not luxury. And he really walked the walk at Walden. I mean, picture this. He builds his own cabin, just a single room, open, airy.
No separate bedrooms, no dedicated home office.
None of that. He saw those divisions, the walls, as literally separating people within their own homes. It's funny how things come full circle, though, right? Because these days, everyone wants an open floor plan. But Thoreau, he was making a point, wasn't he? He found a different kind of luxury in living simply, intentionally, with only what he really needed.
Well, he did famously say that having just 3 rocks on his writing desk stressed him out because they required dusting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine feeling mentally cluttered by a few rocks. I mean, that really puts things in perspective.
It does. It's easy to feel weighed down by stuff, even if it's just a few extra things on your desk, So like he was on to something with this whole minimalism thing way before it was trendy.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And for Thoreau, simplifying wasn't just about material possessions. It went deeper than that. It was about every part of life, including work.
Yeah, he wasn't about that mindless grind, was he? Just working to work, feeling empty. A lot of people struggle with that, even now, finding work that feels meaningful.
Right. And Thoreau really believed in honest, meaningful work. Like, take his experience writing for that publication.
The one that barely even published his stuff.
Yeah. And he basically says that his payment was the joy of writing itself.
There's something really powerful in that. Finding fulfillment in the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. He wasn't depending on external validation or a big paycheck. He was finding his own internal rewards. He was basically a freelancer way back then.
Totally. And speaking of finding fulfillment in unexpected places, he also talked about tending his bean field, right?
Oh, yeah. He describes feeling more satisfaction from that than any other farmer in Concord, even though he wasn't focused on maximizing profits or anything like that.
He was just in it for the experience, the connection to nature, the feeling of creating something.
Exactly. And that connection to nature really comes through in his writing, too. Like those incredibly detailed observations. Most people wouldn't even notice that stuff.
Right. The sound of thawing sand or the way spring arrives. It's like he was really present, paying attention to the smallest details.
He was. And that's what he wanted us to do, to put down the distractions, be present, and actually engage with the world around us, not just observe it through a screen. He was a real advocate for direct experience.
Which is interesting because he was also a pretty sharp social critic. He wasn't just some hermit hanging out in the woods.
Oh, definitely not. He was really tuned in to how society was functioning. And he saw how people were becoming increasingly disconnected from the natural world and also from themselves by this constant pursuit of material wealth and what they thought they were supposed to be doing. It's kind of eerie how relevant it all still feels today, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. So for someone listening to this who's thinking, okay, this is all very thought-provoking, but I'm not about to go build a cabin in the woods, what would you say is the most practical takeaway from Walden?
It's a good question. I mean, you don't have to take it literally, right? Not everyone's cut out for a life of solitude in the wilderness. But you can apply those principles to your own life, whatever that looks like.
So what would that look like, practically speaking? How can someone start incorporating Thoreau's ideas into their modern life?
Well, maybe it's starting small. Like Thoreau's stressed about the rocks on his desk, right? So maybe it's just about being more mindful of what we bring into our homes, asking ourselves, do I really need this? Or am I just caught up in this cycle of wanting more?
It's about being more intentional with our consumption.
Exactly. And it's about finding joy in those simple pleasures, going for a walk, cooking a meal at home. Thoreau talks about finding this deep satisfaction in baking his own bread, you know.
There's that great line where he's talking about researching all these different bread-making techniques. He says he was making the study of the ancient and indispensable art of bread-making, consulting such authorities as offered, going back to the primitive days and first invention of the unleavened kind.
I love that. It's like he brought this incredible intention and curiosity to even the most basic tasks.
It makes grabbing a loaf of sourdough from the grocery store seem kind of sad in comparison, doesn't it?
It really does. But that's the whole point, isn't it? It's about finding that meaning, that intention in everything we do.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive into Walden today, I'm curious, for someone specifically drawn to simple living and self-sufficiency, what do you think is the biggest takeaway? What would you say to them?
You know, it's funny you should ask that because for me, Thoreau's message really hits home with anyone interested in simple living and self-sufficiency.
It's like he wrote the book on it, right?
He really did. And I think at its core, he's challenging us, challenging us to really think about what truly sustains us.
Not just materially.
Exactly. But also spiritually, like what really feeds our souls. And for him, it was about aligning yourself with nature, with meaningful work, with your own inner voice. Not chasing external validation or collecting a bunch of stuff.
Marching to the beat of your own drummer.
Yes. And understanding that real wealth, like true wealth, it isn't about your bank account or how many possessions you have.
It's about the richness of your experiences.
Yes. Your connection to nature, how deeply you know yourself, that kind of thing.
And that's something you can cultivate anywhere, right? You don't have to go full Thoreau, build a cabin in the woods.
Definitely not. It's more about finding those pockets of simplicity and intentionality in your own life, wherever you are.
So basically, Thoreau wouldn't necessarily tell everyone to become a minimalist or, give away all their possessions.
Right? It's not about that. It's more about really examining your life, stripping away what's not necessary, both physically and mentally.
Making space for what truly matters.
Yes, and rediscovering how powerful simplicity can be, how important it is to be present, and that connection we all have to nature. That's huge.
So as we wrap up here, I'm curious, was there anything in Walden that particularly stuck with you? A passage, a story, even just a feeling?
You know, for me, it's that image of Thoreau standing in his bean field, feeling so content, more content, he says, than the wealthiest farmer in Concord. It's just a good reminder that true wealth isn't about what you own, but about how you feel, about living a life that's true to you.
Beautifully said. And hey, even if we just take away a little bit of that wisdom from Thoreau, that's something. He really makes you think differently. It's inspiring, actually. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep finding those simple joys in everyday life, and maybe try baking some bread from scratch. You never know, you might just find your own version of Walden in the process.